serious mistake.
Not as serious as yours, I fear.
كتب عليكم القتال وهو كره لكم وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون.
إن الحمد لله وحده والصلوات والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. So, a little bit of humor aside, one, how do we understand life when things do not go in the direction that we would like them to go? We may often think that we know best and that we know what is the correct thing to do. But sometimes we're wrong. And therefore we always should turn back to the Qur'an, of course, turn back to the Book of Allah to remind us about how do we process our world around us and how do we process our wishes and our desires. I know many people in the Muslim community were very disappointed that Bernie Sanders did not get, or appears that he will not get, the Democratic nomination to run for President of the United States. And it's probably a safe bet to say that many in the community were hopeful of Bernie and many despised Trump. I personally am pretty neutral on it, but I still want to address this because I think it's something important. And I'll explain a little bit why I'm neutral. Some of you go, well, God, how could you possibly be neutral on a person like Donald Trump when there's Bernie Sanders and, of course, even with Joe Biden and so on. So, yeah, I want us to look for a moment at what each of these three candidates is espousing, their policies, and particularly those in light of Islam. I want us to consider those and not focus so much on the cult of personality around either the total admiration for Bernie Sanders or the total condemnation of Donald Trump. And I have a little bit more of a dispassionate look at this, and then also in light of the Qur'an. And yes, I had put up a graphic of that chapter, that verse rather, from Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, even though the graphic is in the riwayah or the narration of Hafs, that actually the qari, the reciter, is in Warsh. Allah says to the believers, when the Muslim community was reaching a certain point where they were going to have to start taking responsibility for themselves and for their long-term feasibility and survivability right in the world. So Allah then finally says to them, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ, right? كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ وَهُوَ كَرْهٌ لَكُمْ. That fighting now is made mandatory upon you, even though it is something that you don't want to do. Which, as a side note, this notion that, Muslims have always been some bloodthirsty ragtag ramble. It really shows actually that historically Muslims, particularly just in the revelatory period, we didn't forget about later in history. In the revelatory period, it was clear that the Muslims did not want to shed blood or to fight for a number of different reasons. And Allah says, "What وَهُوَ كَرْهٌ لَكُمْ." You don't want to do it, you dislike to do it, you hate to do it, but كُتِلَ عَلَيْكُمْ, right? But it's been mandated for you, right? And then he goes on to reveal some of the psychology of the believers, and more importantly, how we should process when a thing perhaps goes sideways or takes a different trajectory than what we had wanted. And therefore Allah says to them, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It might perchance be that there is a thing that you hate it, you dislike it, وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ, but it is actually good for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ كَرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Right? And likewise, there might be something that you really like, but it is actually وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. But it actually might be bad for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah says what? Definitively, Allah is the one that knows what is right and wrong, and what is good and bad, and what is good for you and bad for you, what will be beneficial to you and what is evil for you. Even if the appearance appears to be contradictory to your senses, right? It might be good for you, but you dislike it, or it might be evil for you, even though you like it. And this gives us a chance to actually look at where we have, just in this situation, let's put Joe Biden aside for a second. Let's just take Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Personally, I didn't really care for either one of them, but I understand that particularly Bernie Sanders had become a more beloved candidate to the Muslim community, and Trump had become almost a kind of trope of a villain, right, for the Muslim community. And therefore, people were, I saw, a lot of support in the Muslim community being thrown behind Bernie Sanders. And then I started to not only just see that there was a principle, or rather a pragmatic, right? Well, we don't agree with, but now they were beginning to heap praises upon Bernie Sanders in a way that I think was maybe blinding, right? So, yes, tackling issues like debt and student loans and, sure, that's wonderful, right? But look at Bernie Sanders' stance on abortion, including late-term abortion. And it really shows how Muslims have, I guess apparently this isn't a big deal for Muslims. Well, whatever, as long as we get what's good for us. The issue is, right, the killing of an infant or a child, right, is not a fiqh issue. This is what we call qat'i. This is an issue that is in revelation itself. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And Allah says, and as for the infant child that is buried, that isn't even given a chance at life, what sin did she commit to deserve this fate? And therefore, when I look at, from a broad stance, sure, Bernie Sanders had some admirable qualities. He certainly did appear to, for the most part, be a sincere person. But he's sincerely wrong when it comes to the enormous issue of abortion. And it's troubling that our community was so quick to throw this to the side, which is in revelation. And we're so easy to throw this aside. And likewise, on the flip, yes, Donald Trump is a moral catastrophe and train wreck. And that's why I can't really get behind Donald Trump either. From a moral point of view, Donald Trump is an absolute nightmare on a level of morality. But, again, this is, don't misconstrue this of me telling you how to vote. I'm just saying, looking at things from, say, like a 40,000 foot level through the lens of revelation. One thing certainly that his party, if not him in particular, because I kind of get the feeling that religion ain't that important to Donald Trump. But his party, nonetheless, are certainly going to go to bat for religious rights, particularly the right to say, hey, you know what? You can't come in this masjid as two men and get married. I'm sorry. Like, y'all can't do that stuff here. And that is something that's very much under attack. And likewise on the abortion issue. Whether we like him or not, he certainly seems, or him and of course his party seem to be on the right side of that. Now, of course, they're on the wrong side of a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's what I'm saying. But which things are they on the wrong side of, right? On the wrong side of immigration, while that's an important issue, immigration cannot be elevated to the level of killing children, because when you're doing abortion, this is what you're doing. I'm sorry. Even beyond all of the ikhtilaf, or all beyond the difference of opinion of when life begins, at one point, once life has been established, and there is a sanctity to that, that cannot be violated. Illa bil haqq, as Allah Ta'ala says in the Qur'an. So are we interested in personality and niceties, and are we willing to throw principle away? Because if that's the case, I would question the complete embracing of Bernie Sanders with a kind of reckless abandon. And again, I'm not saying there aren't some things that I definitely could agree on. The issue is we tend to take a very heavy mallet and level everything to the same, just like total like scorched earth when it comes to different issues. And while immigration is an important issue, we cannot compare that to the same level of something that is in the Qur'an itself on the level of killing a child, because again, beyond all of the ikhtilaf, the difference of fiqh, disagreements about, when does conception begin? At one point, we all begin that it's there, right? And therefore, late-term abortion in particular is an absolute affront against Allah Ta'ala. It's an absolute violation of sanctity. And somebody who thinks because it's their body and they have the right to do so, you are simply out of your mind and cannot be substantiated, right, with revelation, cannot be substantiated by the Qur'an. And therefore, to make that issue equal to the issue of immigration shows really, in my opinion, to what extent the Muslim community has been intellectually compromised by the left. And I say that not as a conservative, because I have major problems with the conservative party as well. In fact, one of the great ironies that even if we say, okay, the right get it right on the issue of abortion, so you're so concerned about human life, and yet you will go to war and you will bomb people into the Stone Age, indiscriminately killing children in other countries, right? Somehow that's okay, but you're worried about, right, late-term abortions here in America. So I want to make it clear, I am not a proponent of the right. I'm just saying that this very swift and perhaps rushed embracing of him, right, well, it was a little bit premature. But beyond that, what has happened has happened. And it appears that Joe Biden now will get the nomination, and Allahu Alam whether or not Biden can be Trump or Trump can be Biden. The real issue is this kind of salty feeling that many of us have because Bernie Sanders didn't get it. And what we have to understand is that always behind the scene of everything is Qadr Allah, is Allah's Qadr, His plan, His measurement, His control of everything. And that it could be that even though we don't like a Donald Trump or we don't like a Joe Biden, it could be, though, that even though we dislike both of them, something good may come out of it, right? وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It's important to use this, right? Now the question will be, well, what good could come out of it? Well, maybe the policies themselves will not be good, right? Separating mothers from children, all this stuff, that's definitely not a good thing. But maybe the Muslim, particularly the American Muslim community, will come to see that the thing we should really come together on and be supportive on is not so much the issues of politics, but Islam itself. Like, we should come together as a community. I give one simple example. I was listening to NPR today, driving my daughter to school, and they had mentioned that because of this coronavirus issue, right, some schools may close. And one of the detriments of these schools closing is that low-income kids who already face food insecurity, they rely upon the breakfast and lunch and other food services that they get in school to combat their food insecurity. And if they are forced to go home, then they may not eat. Or their parents who can't afford to stay home to watch them, right? They may not have daycare, right? And therefore, beyond the politics, right? What would we do about that, right? I mean, I placed a phone call today actually to the San Bernardino school district, and I had a conversation with some people in the superintendent's office. Said, look, my name is Mark Manley. I run a Muslim nonprofit religious center, in Upland, California, and I heard this on the news, and I'm very concerned. What could we do to help in light if the coronavirus were to cause schools to shut down? And these children were then to face this. What could we do to help mitigate this difficult circumstance? Could we donate food? Could we donate time? Could we, what could we do? And I'm not saying we solved the problem, but the woman first on the phone was just like, wow, thank you for calling. She's like, that's really inspirational. And it's because of the verse in Surah Al-Insan, وَيُطْمِعُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ, right? Miskinan wa yatiman wa asiran, right? And that the believer is the one who he feeds other people, the poor, the orphan, and even I don't have any prisoners of war to feed, but at least here, right? Poor people and orphans, they feed them even though they love food themselves. يُطْبِعُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ. This is a part of our religion. This is in Revelation. This is in the Qur'an. And meanwhile, we're having khatam, Qur'an readings and dhikr circles for candidates, or we're treating other candidates like they are the Dajjal, or we are missing out on opportunity. If we're living here in America, and some poor people are going to not be able to eat due to, something like corona. Like, the question should not be, what are these children going to do? The question is, okay, how do the Muslims step up and solve this problem? How do we contribute? All of this interfaith stuff that we do that is often highly questionable, that would be actually one time to actually harness the power of the interfaith community and say, hey, look, let's step up, work with the school district, and see if there's some kind of way we can ensure that these kids get what they need. My point being is that there are things of greater concern than politics, and that sometimes affairs of the world go one way even though we would wish them to go another, and we should understand that they may be going a different way. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. It could be that we really thought this was the best way, but actually would be bad for us, or vice versa, right? And recognize that Allah knows and we don't know. And we accept that, and then we look for what is the best way out of what will be pleasing to Allah. So something to keep in mind, to use this book, to use this deen, to use this sunnah of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam to actually figure out how to do life. So, inshallah, May Allah Ta'ala make us from amongst the people who يُطِعِمُونَ تَعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِمْ. May Allah Ta'ala indeed make us people who feed other people despite their love for it, or give up something material despite their love for it, and especially of these beloved groups to Allah, al-masakin wal-yatim. May Allah accept from us and make us successful in this endeavor, and of course may His peace and blessings be upon the best example and the crown of the messengers, Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalamu alaikum.